Welcome to the Talking Statamic podcast, where we talk with developers, agencies, and people who use Statamic every day. I'm your host, Michael Leroy. And today I'm joined by none other than Jack McDade, the creator of Statamic. I couldn't think of anyone better to kick this off with than the man himself. We're talking about Statamic. I wanted to create this podcast as a place for, people like us who love the product, use it all the time, want to connect with other people who are using it, see how they're using it, get ideas from them, and just sort of foster the community a little bit more. Because I think there's opportunity for that. There's a lot going on the Discord and, different social platforms and stuff. But I think, having something like this where new people can discover it a little bit more would be a really great thing to have. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, dude, thank you. I'm excited to tune into this podcast to learn more too. I think it's sometimes there isn't time to have long 1 hour in-depth conversations with, different customers and people that use it. So, I think great place to start talking with me and kind of like high level. And then let's just see where this goes. And I love learning how people use Statamic and which helps us figure out ways to make it better, how to facilitate. Oh, I didn't realize people were using it for that. Like, let's see if we can shape it a little bit better to help. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited that you're taking this new podcast on, and let's get into it.
All right. Well, first of all, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and maybe talk a little bit about what Statamic is and how it came to be, especially for those people who might be hearing about it for the first time or, agencies who might be coming across it and wondering, is this a valid alternative to something that I've been using in the past?
Yeah. So Jack McDade, I'm the creator of Statamic. 12 years ago, kind of came up with the idea for a different type of CMS, one that would be easier for me to manage my own clients. So I was doing freelance web design, web development at the time. I'd come from the agency world and I was tired of working 60, 70, 80 hours for the same pay as 40 hours and always getting the oh, but you're going to get a raise, as soon as we get past this hump. And you're like, it's been 4 years, it's the same message, right? So went on my own, started doing my own work, and that was great. But once I had 4 or 5 clients, it was hard to maintain all of those different websites in a really easy way where we want to add, I don't know, a news section to our site. Cool, great. I was using Expression Engine at the time, which is a, CMS. It's actually still around, owned by my buddy, Tom Jager, who lives 2 streets over from me. Just fun fact. Yeah, just fun fact. I see him all the time. But so I was using Expression Engine at the time, but I really wanted to just do everything with Git. So if a client would be managing the content on the website, they'd be logging in and adding content or whatever, changing content. If I was working on the local development version of that same site, now we were out of sync. The database, there was no way to merge the database changes. And it just became this, I was spending more time not working than working. So I'm let's see if we can take the content out of the database and just put that in version control as well, but still have all the features that you're used to. And that was the idea. That was the genesis. Hacked on it with a buddy for a couple of months. Mubs, who was my original kind of co-founder, who hung around for less than a year, and he loved starting new projects. And so he's it's fine. So just kind of picked up the ball and ran with it ever since. That was a long time ago. It was 12 years ago. The first version of Statamic was built on Slim PHP. Everything was written inside one giant closure file. All the routes and all the logic was basically everything was in one file. It was
oh wow,
it was very very small, simple. I mean, it was really a proof of concept. Can we do it? And the answer was yeah. We actually that first version of Statamic was used by Asana for years. Even though
oh wow, okay.
I didn't think it would even run my personal site that well, but apparently it was okay. So 12 years later, it's a very different application with a lot more broader appeal, as you'll get into, and we'll get into more specifics. But that's my background. That's where Statamic came from. The name Statamic is the words static and dynamic smushed together into a portmanteau, because it's
Right. Yeah.
how to make a dynamic site, a dynamically powered content management system with an admin panel that you log into that can like randomize content and pull stuff live and dynamic and sort and do all that kind of stuff that you'd expect like WordPress or other platforms to do, but do it all with static files, no database. So that's where the name came from. Nobody can pronounce it even 12 years later. And oh well, what are we gonna do? There's no good. All the good
Yeah.
domain names are taken. So that's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's too late now, I guess, to change.
It's too late. Yeah.
Okay, so from those early days, like I know it's evolved quite a bit, but are the fundamentals the same? Were you using Markdown and YAML files to store configurations and content?
Yeah. I mean, the really base fundamentals are still the same. The way they work and what you can do with them, and how they're structured and enforced are obviously different. But yeah, at its base level, default Statamic install. Your content lives in Markdown files. There's front-loaded YAML matter at the top of that file, which lets you store other variables in that, and a control panel lets you edit that without ever having to touch it by hand if you don't want to. All that is, YAML fits to the JSON spec, so it means it's structured language, and all that data is kind of like parsed and compiled into an API that's then used to power your site dynamically. So it's simple, like from a conceptual level, but a lot of work has gone into actually making it performant.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right? Because it wasn't performant, in the early days once you got over like a certain scale. Yeah.
So at what point did you then decide to pivot and make it a Laravel app, and how much did that affect the performance?
Yeah, so Statamic version 2, which was, I think, 2014, 2015, a little bit little fuzzy now, but that was, we rewrote, like Jason Varga came on board, and we rewrote Statamic as a Laravel application. And that was like Laravel, boy, where does the time go? I don't know, 5 maybe? Laravel 6, something like that. And so it was like a finished Laravel app. Like we built it and distributed it as a Laravel app, which was a big enhancement over the Slim thing. We made ways where you can hook in and kind of do like tap into some of the Laravel stuff with add-ons. There was a lot of consistency around how the app was structured. But the limitation of doing it that way meant that you couldn't drop Statamic into an existing Laravel app, right? It was the Laravel app. And the version that we supported was like the locked version of Laravel. Laravel being a framework, you should be flexible enough that you can use different versions and like drop it in, drop it out. So it wasn't until Statamic 3 where it wasn't a full rewrite, but we had to like significantly refactor it into a composer package that could then be installed into a Laravel app. So now it's very flexible. You can add it way late into a project, into an app that's been run for years, drop a CMS in, boom, and off you go. I don't know why we didn't think of doing that in the first place. I think it was because like we didn't want to have a open repo. Like we couldn't distribute it with Composer because we were afraid people would steal our code, and we were so small. But yeah, all those days are gone.
Yeah. In retrospect, do you wish you'd made that decision sooner? I mean,
yes.
I think you've mentioned in other programs, the idea of opening up the code has, opened up this whole new world of contributors, and really advanced the progress of the app.
Yeah, that was a very fear-based approach to building a product, and probably fear and pride based, where I thought we'd build something so great, if it was easily accessible, clearly someone would steal it from us, and we wouldn't be able to, like do what we do anymore. And I think that's part of it. And the other part was like, coming from the expression engine community system, like I was used to like sling and zip files, kind of like old school. And now like Composer is the way to go. Like it's, having your dependencies managed by a dependency system that's like, what's the word? Like distributed, right? It's like non-centralized. It's just so much better for everybody involved. So yeah, I wish we did that like right out the gate. I think we would have had much quicker adoption. We would have people who were able to contribute hobbyists or people who like needed to fix a bug like quickly because something happened and they could just send us the fix. Like we have so many contributors now.
Did you have core team members come on before that, or was that as a result of that decision, do you think?
I mean, we had, yeah, so we were me and Jason for a while, and then we had Gareth, Jaggy. Like we always had a couple people, but we were small, like three, maybe three and a half people, like a freelancer or something. But yeah, we really, we open sourced the code, we built it as a composer package, and 2017 like released that like was that 6 7 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if you look at our growth, that's when things really started to like actually take off. So Statamic 3 was really like the version where it was like the product was kind of packaged in the way it ought to have always been.
Yeah. Did that enable Statamic to stand on its own as like as a company for you in terms of
Yeah, that's when we went like
providing a livelihood?
yes. Yeah. Whereas like before that, Jason was a full-time employee, but I couldn't work on it full-time. Like we had enough money for like 1.5 people coming in, I don't,
Okay.
whatever it
Yeah.
was, like $7,000 or $8,000 a month or something. And it's like, all right, well, one of us can go full-time, the other can't. And you're a way better coder than me, and we already have the UI and design stuff done. So like Jason went full-time, and I would just do like design work for hire to like cover the gap until
Yeah.
that point where you're like, ooh, now we made enough where like we both could reasonably live on this, and it just started to grow from there. But man, it took
Nice.
persistence. It took a long time. Like took a long time.
Yeah. And your core team hasn't grown all that much either, right? You've kept it pretty small since then.
It's still small. We just hired someone new, which the announcement was supposed to go out today, and I forgot. I'm just getting over.
So by the time this is out, the news should be released, I would imagine.
Yeah. It'll go out tomorrow. Today is February 12th. I don't know when this is going out, but so we hired Jay George, who is a longtime community member, designer, and phenomenal front end developer. He also co-hosts the Code Rush podcast with Rob DeCourt.
Oh, right on.
Rob is the creator of Peak, like the biggest, like most popular starter kit in the community. So, Jay is going to be an awesome addition to the team. I will not have to be the only designer and front end devs on the team, but I guess that makes
congrats to both of you.
Yeah, thanks. I think that puts us at 6 now. So there's me, Jason, Jesse, Duncan, Joshua, Jay, and then Aaron part-time. So like that's 7, 6 full-time, and John does some like stuff on contract. So kind of 6 or 8 depending on how you look at it.
Cool.
That's a lot
right
different
on.
than 1.5.
Yeah. No, you guys come a long way for sure. How would you say that the size of your team enables you to work effectively? Compared to a behemoth kind of project where maybe there's whole teams that work on a release and it's so distributed and there's hundreds of people. Like you guys can probably work in a much more agile fashion,
For sure.
right?
Yeah, I want to stay as small as possible for that reason, and while still being big enough that we can hit where we have the people and like the right positions in the company to get everything done in like a reasonable amount of time, which is we weren't and haven't been. Like design is always like just taken so long because I'm also running business and like there's just so many things like from a product direction and like I just end up being a bottleneck on like the design or like the front end side. So, but yeah, staying small allows us to like just go, like everybody is kind of all in and is aware of like how everything's supposed to work, which means that we're all able to jump in and out and collaborate. We don't have discrete like separate teams. We don't need meetings to like transfer information from one team to another team and all of that. So the smaller, the better in that regard, because we can just stay nimble and we can say like, hey, for a week, let's just pause and like, let's crank out this thing that seems really important. And it doesn't take, the whole company, there's about 100 people trying to pivot on a dime.
I guess the feature set is, pretty stable these days, right? You're not looking to revolutionize the way that people enter their content or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, define revolutionize. I mean, like the what we have is great and stable. We want to enhance. I would say enhance is better.
Sure.
Because we don't want to change the way things work fundamentally overall. Like because people like it, we like it. But there's things you can't do or things that are clunky. There's always something that you can make better. So
Yeah.
as we're working full time on Statamic 6 right now, which we're shooting for sometime Q2. And the goal is to make it much better without it being like, oh, I miss the old way of doing things, right? Like
Right.
we kind of had a little bit of that between the way V2 and View version 2 and version 3 worked. Where it's like, oh, I kind of liked the version 2 way of things, but like
Sure.
we understand why you did that. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel in that regard, but we want to make everything continually better user, like
Right.
especially like around the user experience side in design. So like working heavily on redesigning or refreshing the UI, making it faster, more
Hmm.
performant, giving you new views and new capabilities to features, the way to configure things in a more flexible way without like taking anything away from you.
Can you give us any sneak peeks of like what that's going to look like or specific features? I guess like I think you mentioned
Yeah,
forms in a partner call
yeah.
before.
So we want to take forms to the next level. Whether the full version of what we want to build will be out for 6.0 or not, I'm not sure. Like that's too early to tell. But the
Okay.
goal with forms, if you're familiar with Statamic forms right now, they're pretty like robust, like functionally, but you kind of need to have a developer involved in kind of wiring it up and like making the
Hmm.
front end part of it or like configuring it. So the goal with forms is to make it client friendly so that a writer or a technical person or a non-technical person or client essentially would be able to create landing pages, would be able to set up their own success message and have configure like where notifications go or send stuff to Salesforce or whatever CRM. Basically, just like make that whole area, that whole feature usable without a developer. And I think that's something that people have really wanted for a long time. It's something that WordPress
Hmm.
um, has a lot of really strong options. I mean, like Woo Forms is like, I don't
Yeah.
know, 1,000 times bigger than us as a company. Just then all they do is the form thing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
we want to do it in a classic Statamic fashion that's flexible, simple, intuitive with like smart defaults. But I think what we're working on is going to be pretty great for everybody. So that's
Very
yeah,
exciting. Looking forward to
that's
seeing
one
that.
area. Um, I've got some plans to make the user management, user areas stuff better, like more useful. Um, General like UI, just like the look and feel of it should look more modern, more
Hmm.
better use of space as well, and better use of
Okay.
better patterns for when you have kind of like deeply nested data, right? So one of the really unique things about Statamic being like a flat file or like an object store based content management system is like you can create data structures that's like really not possible with other CMSs.
Hmm.
Like you can have a grid field that has a replicator, that has a bar, that has a set, which is another grid with like another field. Like you can have this data that's like so nested, which is amazing when you come across like really complex things. Like if you try to ever data model a menu, like a restaurant menu, like that
Yeah.
is like the classic. Well, you've got pages and then like meals. So you got like the appetizer section and you've got a thing and you got a variant, you got a price. And like there's like, you want to like
Right.
manage all that and make it look easy. So you can do all that right now, but the further you nest all that data, like the clunkier it starts looking when you have like a field and a field and a field and a field, and it's
For
like
sure.
Excel tables inside Excel tables. So we want to come up with ways to like, maybe not show all the fields, like stop here and then you like pop open that next section. You can kind of start from the top again in ways where you can
Yeah.
like manage that in a much more like segmented way. I think that has a chance to really open some doors on like how people choose to model the data based on the interface you get. So right now, if the interface gets too complicated, you might want to say like, well, this maybe the menu shouldn't be a field, like it should actually be a collection, and the collection has an entry, and the entry has a thing, and the thing, like because you
Right.
get that extra top level. So if you don't have to model the data that way just to get a different UI, then it opens up a lot of windows there as well.
Right. And and a collection can be used as any kind of data that you want,
Correct.
right? That's
That
one of the nice flexible things about Statamic.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the key is just to make everything as flexible as possible so that it can adapt to your own content and your own site. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. While you were talking about that, I was remembering my days working with Drupal 7,
Mm.
and we had to use, there was a module called views where you had to like visually, replace tokens and stuff all in the UI. Everything was saved in the
Hmm.
database that way, and it just made development really slow.
Yeah.
It was powerful what it could do, but man, was it difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so how would you compare Statamic now with the current landscape of content management systems out there?
That's a good question. I don't use all the other content management systems out there. So I'm probably,
Yeah,
of all the people that will be on this podcast, I will be the most biased and the least educated, most likely, to answer that question. However,
fair enough. Fair
I
enough. Yeah.
can kind of say what other people say. They're also biased because they're people that like Statamic. Hence, they tell me things.
Hmm.
Um, but it's someone wrote a message yesterday that kind of I thought did a good job of summing up like where Statamic fits. Like Drupal makes site building easy, but theming is rough because it interjects HTML everywhere. WordPress makes theming
Hmm.
easy, but everything else is a nightmare. But Statamic actually hits both of those. It makes theming and building easy and lets you manage that on your own. Which I think now that there's only Drupal and WordPress, of course, there's like hundreds of platforms, but um,
Sure.
I think Statamic kind of hits a really unique sweet spot of being a self-hosted option. So you own your site that is flexible with the fields and the way that and what you do with your fields, that is easy to theme on the front end and scales and give you scaling options. And then Laravel's under the hood. So if you need to do something Statamic doesn't do, you've got the best PHP framework under the sun kind of sitting right
Yeah.
there. If you don't want to write it yourself, there's probably a composer package that does whatever it is you need that you can wire up. Spotsy has like, I forget, 500 something like repos of like
Right.
incredible
Legendary.
thing. You can use all that stuff with it, or at least most of it with Statamic. So yeah, it's a phenomenal
Yeah.
ecosystem. And we're really like tremendously blessed by Laravel.
Yeah, I'd say so for sure. I mean, I think I only heard of Statamic because, this was years ago now. The agency that I worked at, we were sort of code language framework
Mhm.
agnostic at the time, and we'd use Rails for this or Laravel for that. But a bunch of our developers really, really favored Laravel, and this is back in the Laravel
Sure.
4 and 5 days, I think. And then, as any agency struggles to do, that they wanted to redo their own website, and it never, they just keep kicking the can down the road. And eventually, probably a few months before I left that agency, they finally released a new one, and they chose
Nice.
Statamic. Um, so that would have been in 2017 or
Okay.
18,
Yeah.
I think. So
Should
would
be
that be
should be
version
version
three,
three.
maybe?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I first heard of it, and seeing what Glide could do with images and stuff like that was
Yeah.
pretty exciting. So that's kind of when it first appeared on my radar, and I didn't really have the opportunity to dive into that for a couple of years, just because of whatever else was on my
Yeah.
plate. But I would say that sentiment that you just read a minute ago, just comparing it to like Drupal theming and WordPress theming, how one's easier than the other for a given part of it. I
Yeah.
really agree. In my experience, that Statamic kind of marries those two. It's
Yeah.
kind of the sweet spot.
I would say where Statamic doesn't line up against WordPress, and I'm sure you kind of, this comes up in your YouTube videos and stuff though, is like for that really non-technical person who wants to install plugins to do everything and never touch code, really at some point, someone needs to touch some code in every Statamic site at the
Yeah.
current point, unless you want to just use a starter kit and just the way it is. And we need to have more starter kits, and we're going to get there. We're going to have a big push sooner or later for starter kits. But yeah, right now it gives you all those things as long as there is a technical person in the mix for part of the project.
Right. Yeah, I think with WordPress, there's a certain level of website that's true for that world as well. You can do a lot without developers in WordPress, but at a certain point, you're probably going to need one
and
anyway.
that's where that's where the direct comparison comes in.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about WordPress, there's been drama over there, which we don't necessarily need to get into, but I imagine that's probably led to tire kickers over in Statamic land. Would you say that's contributed? Has there been an influx?
A lot. So like a surprising, maybe not surprising, but a lot. We've like to the point where we had to create our own, from WordPress channel in Discord because like there were so many people that wanted to like ask questions coming from a WordPress background, because there is, if you know someone's context, it is easier to answer, oh, like you're in WordPress, you do this, in Statamic, you do that. They're kind of functionally equivalent in some way. So that was helpful. And yeah, I mean, we noticed a lot of people coming in. We built an importer, a WordPress importer that seems to have been used quite a bit. So all of those things have helped grow the community even further. And by bringing a lot of people in from the WordPress world, they're bringing ideas that maybe have never existed inside Statamic, but have value and like ways of doing things. Like, oh, that's a cool idea. Like we never really, no one here does it that way because we don't use WordPress. So like little ideas and things come here and there, and just kind of like raises the experience for everybody, which is very cool.
Would you say there's any like misconceptions about Statamic for those new people coming in that you want to clear up? Like, do people have assumptions coming in?
The most common assumption is around the idea of the flat file CMS and like that it can't scale, or that there's like it's only meant for small sites or that kind of thing. And we're mostly over that, but we still hear it every now and then. But that's just not true, because Statamic can run on a database as well. Like the fact of the matter is it's a single command line command you need to run, and it will import everything and like build all your tables out and all that. So it's really like irrelevant at this point. The thing we do recommend most people start building the site in flat file mode, because you can version control everything. So if you're working on a team, like everybody can stay in sync on like all those little like content and blueprint changes, and we'll test content. So you don't have like, oh, in my test database and your test database has that thing, and you get to share all of that and like work on branches. And then it's like, all right, well, we know this is going to scale up, we're going to turn it on, and like we're going to get tens of thousands of users or something. Like, yeah, switch to a database and then go live. And then from that point, at least still all your templates and your config stuff can still be version controlled. So I think.
Right. Is there a certain threshold where you think the database is better?
For sure. Yeah, it's probably around, I don't know. It depends. It's probably around 5 to 15,000 entries, or like to 100 users. If you like, but you can put your users in a database and still leave your content in flat file if you prefer. So if you can have a couple hundred users, I think it's just easier to just go with the database there. You don't have to worry about it. And then if you have small entries, just like little records, like little news things or whatever, then you can go more. It's just like the amount of content is really it. So like all that stuff gets kind of compiled down into like JSON caches and things. And so at some point that gets kind of too big to open and index properly. So if your entries are big, maybe 2,500. If your entries are small, maybe 10,000, 15,000. But if you start to see like some performance problems, you can add Redis for caching. So you're not using the file system, using Redis. Sometimes that's enough and you're good. Otherwise, switch
Yeah.
to MySQL and you're off and running. So that's probably the
Yeah.
biggest misconception we have around, what Statamic can do. And once you're in a database, like, whatever, like we're the same as everybody else from like a data perspective, more or less. So
Yeah. And, and just given what you just explained, I would imagine probably 90% or more of websites out there probably don't have that use case where they need
yeah,
to go that direction, because that's a lot of
yeah.
records.
I mean, and there,
Unless it's a big e-commerce store with like thousands of
yeah,
products,
or a
or
large news
some.
site, or
Yeah.
a site that has a lot of user generated content. Like if you don't know how much you're gonna
Mhm.
have, use a database. If you know, like, oh, this is the, you know, like a local dentist office or a service company, it's going to have 10 to 30 pages, a couple of landing pages, maybe six users. Like you will not be able to tell the difference between flat file and database. Especially, I mean, if you don't have,
Right.
like, if you can turn static caching on, like 2 millisecond response time is, you can't beat anything. Like that's as fast as you can go. Like you're just talking about physics at that point. So, yeah,
Can you talk about the community a little bit? I mean, we've got the Statamic Discord, but there's also the broader Laravel community. How is that? Um, how you would say that's contributed to the success of
yeah. I
Statamic
mean, the
in recent
community.
years?
We can talk about features and what flat file can do, and being able to version control. Like all those things are great, but like the real superpower, in my opinion, is the community. They are most of the community, like the day-to-day community interaction, happens in Discord, and there's always something happening on
Hmm.
social media, whether it's Twitter, X, Blue Sky, or Mastodon, or I don't know, whatever. Facebook, I guess, LinkedIn. There's stuff people even talk about it on LinkedIn. Okay, but Discord is where ninety
Yep.
percent of that happens online. And you can just go in there at any hour of the day, and there's just people chatting, having a good time, answering questions for people. And it's just the level of help that people provide in there, just out of the goodness of their own heart, because they were helped. Like it's
Yeah.
really next level. Um, and we don't take that for granted. Like we try to do our best to foster that, and to use some of our resources to, like, we'll spend time in there too, and try to help out. But it's really amazing. And I think that the reputation for how good that community like has spread outside to the Laravel world, and there's people that hang out in Statamic Discord that don't use Statamic because they're like, this is just a really cool place to hang out, right? Like
Yeah.
these people are awesome. And the random channel is full of tech randomness and all that stuff. So it is
Hmm.
like my
Hmm.
favorite social network, is just like jumping into Discord and see what people are chatting about. um, it's pretty great. And then you've got, we try to take that online community and make it real, wherever possible. And we have not done a lot of things yet, but our hope going forward is to have a lot more. Right. So we've like meetups. There's been a few meetups. There's like one in Chicago in December. New Zealand, Australia does an
Hmm.
online Statamic meetup. We've had one in London a year or two ago. And usually, like the night before every Laracon, we try to do like a Statamic night. So if you're in town ahead of time,
Yeah.
and you want to like come out and grab a drink and dinner, we'll host a little gathering somewhere. Usually, like 15 to 30 people will show
Right
up
on.
for a Laracon. So we just had Duncan kind of ran the little meetup at Laracon EU last week ago. Yeah, I think it was last week. I think it was last
Yeah. I
week.
think that was last week. Yeah.
We did that in Dallas, last year at Laracon. We'll do that at Laracon this year in Colorado. So like that's fun. And then we've got Flat Camp, which is kind of our pinnacle. That's our own conference, mini conference, or really more like a summit, right? So
Right.
like
Okay.
we cap it at 50 people. Previous, we call them flat campers. If you've been to flat camp, you are an honorary flat camper. So like if you've been before or if you're a
Mm,
partner, you get first chance to buy tickets, but then we open it up after that. And it's like 3 nights
nice.
all inclusive at some like pretty bougie resort is like what we did last year outside of Rome. It was
Yeah.
insane. It was so much fun. Previous year we did it in North Carolina, rented a bunch of cabins on the top of a mountain, and it was just us. We had like catering come up and bring us all our food and everything. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so this year don't have it booked yet, but it should be like shooting for sometime in the fall. Probably it'll be in North
Okay.
America, probably in the southwest, maybe. It's all very venue
Okay.
dependent because
Yeah.
like we wanted full buyout a place, and it's just us. So everybody
Yeah.
there
Okay.
is there for flat camp. So like anyone is a Statamic fan, so you can just like sit down at any table anywhere. If someone's playing, we're playing soccer, basketball, swimming in the pool. Um, like they're all here for the same thing. You don't have to like wear a
Yeah.
lanyard to like, it's just fun. Um,
And you've talked about that as sort of like the hallway track, right? Like it's a place to just go and like make the connections that you would outside of the actual,
exactly,
keynotes at a
exactly. So
conference.
like every conference I've ever been to, the best part, maybe it's the keynote, right? You want to see it like, oh, cool. I see like the sweet stuff that comes out. Maybe there's like one talk that you're like, oh, that like actually lines up with a project I'm working on. And usually everything else is good content, but I don't need it right now. It's not timely. So like the hallway track, when
Mm.
you're like walking around outside the talks to the other people who don't need that information right now, tends to be like the other business owners or whatever. It's like, that's where I got all the value. That's where I made my connections and friends. Like all the business owners are out in the
Totally.
hallway hanging out. All the developers are in trying to soak up information or try to justify coming to the conference to their boss. So like I made
Yeah.
so many friends that way, like Adam Alvin and Taylor Otwell and like Caleb Porzio. Like these are like good buddies now because we like hung out in the hallways at Laracon. Or actually, I met Taylor at
Yeah.
PeersConf like way before there was a Laracon. So we want a conference that is like just the hallway track with the keynote, right? So we'll do like a session, like one session per day, one official session, and then an optional spontaneous session in the afternoon. That comes like, so if something came up in that first session that people want to talk about more, like, all right, we'll talk about that in the pool. Like last year in Rome, people want to talk about Statamic Enterprise. I'm like, you guys want to talk about enterprise? It's not like boring, dry. Like, yes, we want to talk about Statamic Enterprise. Like, all right, I'll see you in the pool at 2. And we literally a bunch of pasty white dudes and
Yep.
you know,
Yeah. Apply the
absolutely, we were all
sunscreen.
blinding each other with our pasty white skin, and we talked enterprise, and it was awesome. So, that's kind of the pattern we've been doing, and it's been really good so far. So, yeah,
That's really cool. Yeah.
yeah,
So, thinking about, these aspects of the community, that to me, that answers some of the questions that, hesitant agencies might have about, what sort of support or adoption does this actually have if I'm considering this over, my clients come to me and they ask for
yeah.
WordPress because that's what they know. If you want to about that a little bit, like it answers that question, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good chance to. I mean, just look at who comes to these. Look at who's using Statamic, and really like look at the Laravel world. See who in like look at the companies that are using Laravel. How many people are using Laravel? All those people are going to be inherently like able to pick up Statamic faster than anyone else. So
Yeah.
because we build Statamic in a way that is very consistent with the way Laravel's built, a lot of common conventions and patterns, and like how things are organized from a code level, and how what things are named. Like they're all kind of fit the Laravel convention. So like an average good Laravel developer is probably going to pick up Statamic really quickly, and I think that just
Yeah.
lets you open up the world into like who could potentially work on a Statamic site. And that just like makes a huge difference. Um, yeah, I mean we're pretty big. Like as far as like we've got a lot of users. We
Yeah.
just don't spend money on awareness. Like we just don't do Squarespace Wix style advertising out there. It's just I'd
Hmm.
rather put the money back directly into the community. Whether by running events, hiring on more, some new people so that we can make the product better, that kind of thing, rather than just trying to just convince everybody and their sister and brother, whatever, to use
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah. Well, I hope the show can contribute to that a little bit
I
on
hope
some
so
level.
too.
So
Yeah, that would be great. Every little bit helps, for sure. And yeah, I mean, we're hoping, over the next year to get, we're going to call it like the Statamic World Tour. We want to get a lot of meetups going, like, and sync them up so that we can bounce around and get someone from the core team to like every or as many meetups around the world as possible. So if you're interested in hosting a Statamic meetup, we're starting with the partners, asking if any of the partners want to, host Statamic meetups in their city and kind of like get the first one under the belt and then maybe line up, for the second or third one. One of us can come out and, hang out with everybody and maybe do a little lightning talk or something. And just have that,
right on.
like if, Statamic is coming to a city near you and you're just kind of curious to come out and meet who in my city is using Statamic. Like that's a great way to say like, oh, dude, there's like 50 people there. That's like represents maybe 40 companies I didn't even know were in my city. That's pretty cool. If that happens, right? I mean, I can't promise that it'll happen, but we're gonna see if we can make it happen. Yeah.
How would you want new people to get involved? If people are coming to Statamic for the first time, like,
I mean, if someone is new to Statamic, I don't expect or even necessarily want them to contribute. I want them to fall in love with Statamic. So I want them to build a site, whether it's their own blog or portfolio or their agency site or do a small client project or whatever, and like try it out and get the light bulb moment, understand how Statamic works and how to play, how to work with the thing, the opinions rather than fight against them. And once you're at that point, I think contribution becomes a lot more interesting because the contributions will come from like the moment of, from the perspective of like, oh, this is what Statamic really needs versus, if you just want to show up to build a starter kit, we've had some people do that, like build their first starter kit and they haven't really even built up a real world Statamic site yet. And like,
right.
The navigation is like HTML into a code field in a global. Like that's not how you should how you should do a nav. Like you should learn the system first, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, add-ons and starter kits are a really great thing to contribute, both for the greater ecosystem and potentially for yourself, because you connect your Stripe account, you can sell them in the marketplace like that. And definitely gives you, if you're a designer, if you want to, learn how to build a Statamic site and like hook up your designs to a Statamic starter kit and start selling it. I mean, that's potential revenue right there. Other than that, if you're new and like falling in love with Statamic or like really enjoying like the challenge or of learning a new thing, like blog along with your experience and just post some blog posts out there or YouTube videos, or if you're into TikTok or Instagram or whatever, like short form content can be pretty great because people find that and helps them, helps you, helps us, and then raise the water level, for everybody.
Okay. Well, I think, we're coming short on time here.
Sure.
I think, but couple just fun things to wrap us up before we sign off. So these are like important life questions here that I'm going to throw at you.
Ooh. Okay.
The first one is light or dark mode? Go.
Ooh. Dark mode. Used to be light. I was hardcore light mode, but I am everything. I'm like 41 now, so my eyes are constant in a state of strain. Dark mode all the way.
Awesome. Okay. Favorite font? What's your go-to if you had to pick one?
Gosh, if I have to pick one, everyone picks Enter, which is really boring. But I love Lore is my favorite handwritten font. I'd like use it. Looks great, really small. Yeah, I mean, I can't really just pick one. That's like which is my favorite kid. I love fonts.
Yeah.
But
okay, tabs or spaces?
Four spaces.
Four spaces. Okay.
Yep. Four spaces.
For me, it's
yeah.
the tab key that generates four spaces.
Yep. Exactly. Yes. Oh, I'm not hitting my spacebar four times. I'm using the tab key, but it is not registering a tab character.
100%.
That's for sure. Yes.
Okay. Pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
Yeah. All the better with ham and or pineapple. Pineapple?
There's a new word.
Pineapple.
Yeah.
Pineapple.
And last but not least, Nintendo or Sega Genesis? For us old guys.
Nintendo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nintendo. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see it there. Yeah. Which is the best one? Which is the best console?
Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
Super Nintendo.
And the best game on the best console?
Best game on the best console. Secret of Mana was my favorite at the time. It's not as playable now as like some of the other games. Like what's in there? I don't know. Super Mario All Star, Super Mario World.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 2, Super classic. Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Technically, that's probably the greatest Super Nintendo game.
Right on.
Yeah,
right on.
For sure.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about Jack, if they want to learn more about Statamic?
Yeah. JackMcDade.com will kind of be the hub for finding me on the socials. Like I'm on mostly just Twitter, X, but I'll pop onto Blue Sky and Mastodon too, just to keep some things up to date. Statamic, Statamic.com. We are on all the socials there too, so you can hit us wherever. Don't really have preferences, more just being available to people where they're at. And then also Discord. So statamic.com/Discord is our short link to get you right to our Discord server, channel, room, whatever it's called. And we're all in there. Look for the pink name tags. Those are all the Statamic core team members.
Pink name tags. Got it. Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that's a wrap. Thanks, Jack, for being our first guest ever on the new podcast.
Right on.
For my dear listeners and viewers, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player, or we're over on YouTube if you'd like to watch, and leave a comment, leave us a review. Follow us on X at Talking Statamic. We're also on Blue Sky, and you can join the mailing list at talkingstatamic.com. Thanks for watching and listening, and hope to see you in the next one.